call Reno Tirikardini.
Kia ora, Mr Chair. I'm pleased to take a call on this Part 2 committee stage of this bill. Mr Chair, just at the outset, I'd like to respond to Dr Smith's comments that the bill is actually good law and that has been substantially knocked into shape by the Minister. I'd just like to say that in terms of Māori and treaty relationships, this bill falls well short of measuring up in terms of protection of Māori interests. But firstly, I'd just like to also stand in support of the two SOPs from my colleague Moana Maki, SOP 103 and 106. But getting back to the issues in terms of Māori rights, Mr Chair, I'm picking up on the Māori Advisory Committee because the Māori Advisory Committee is a positive step in terms of its relationship with the EPA, and it would have been good to have seen the role of the Māori Advisory Committee strengthened. The MAC, as I'll call it, only has a power to advise. There's no power to bind, nor is there an onus on the EPA to even show that they've taken on board any of the recommendations or advice from the Advisory Committee, nor should they or are they obliged to take anything into serious consideration. So this is not good enough, and it does relegate Māori interests as secondary under the consenting process, which is outlined in Part 2. So the Advisory Committee, yes, it has a power to advise, but again, it's only may. So their power to advise is optional, it's not mandatory, and the EPA may choose to receive the advice of the Advisory Committee, but it does not have to. So, that is not good enough, and we don't want a situation where the Advisory Committee is merely, or Māori interests are merely just a box that's to be ticked in the consenting process. Consultation with Māori must extend beyond the Māori Advisory Committee and include iwi and hapu, as views do differ from region to region. And I refer to the submission from my own iwi down in Ngaitahu, where they have very strong views as to their role as kaitiaki in terms of the EEZ zone, which is equivalent to 50% of the total area of the EEZ falls within the Ngaitahu takiwā. The next area where this bill falls short in Part 2 in relation to tangata whenua interests is around the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi, and it was disappointing that the SOP that we put up in Part 1 to broaden the recognition or adherence, the general obligation of the treaty between the Crown and iwi was not adopted, but the bill does need to be strengthened to give better effect to the principles of te tiriti or Waitangi. As I mentioned, there's no general obligation on the Crown to give effect to those principles, and there only are references to specific clauses in terms of activities through the consenting process, but there is no general obligation, which is an obligation on the Crown. And just as an example, if we go through Part 2, clauses 32, 33, 46, they don't give proper effect to the principles of the treaty, as the sections are largely toothless and they don't impose any concrete obligations. It's merely a notification type obligation by the Minister or by the EPA. So the bill does not recognise the special relationship Māori do have with their taonga, which in this case is the marine environment, and this is a clear breach of treaty principles. And there's long established tribunal jurisprudence and the like on these treaty principles, and that means that there is a duty to give effect to iwi's or Māori relationship with their taonga. And so how can the bill claim to give effect to the principles of the treaty when the bill breaches the most important principle, the principle of partnership, and a key aspect of that partnership is the relationship with taonga when it's omitted from the bill? So the principles of the treaty are not given concrete enough effect, and this, Mr. Chair, and this may expose the Crown to legal action in terms of failure to adhere to its treaty obligations. The bill does not actively protect interests of active protection. They're not given full effect. Instead, these duties are delegated down to bodies such as the EPA and other lesser bodies. So, recognising the special relationship with Māori that Māori do have with the marine environment is fundamental to this bill. It was a key part of the submissions that many iwi and other interested Māori groups gave to the Select Committee, and unfortunately they haven't been given an expression in the bill, and it does arguably open up some litigation risk around those. In addition to the shortcomings from all of the other areas which have been identified earlier in the debate. So I'll just conclude my contribution here, but I will pick it up in part 3, some other aspects around the tangata whenua interests. Kia ora.
Oh, Andrew Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I take a call on the